A portion of this video is sponsored by Surfshark. So in front of me are a couple of phones. Both are playing the exact same video and they have roughly the same screen size, but there's a pretty obvious difference. See it yet? Alright, well, the phone on the left has a completely uninterrupted display. No notch, no punch hole, nothing getting in the way of your content. Hi everyone, Thao here. So this is the ZTE Axon 30. And its most interesting feature by far is the second generation under display selfie camera. If I'm being honest, the hole punch has never really bothered me. Heck, I get by perfectly fine with the notch on my iPhone 12 mini. But I do know people who can't stand either. And if that's you, this is great news then, right? On paper, the specs for this phone are very respectable, considering that it costs $500. The 120Hz AMOLED display is completely flat and maxes out at 1080p. It's a nice, bright, good-looking display that I've really enjoyed using. Now, if you really inspect it, you can sort of make out the under-display camera at certain angles. Otherwise, you're barely gonna notice it. If you consume a lot of content on your phone, not having a hole cut into your game or movie is pretty nice and a big reason why you'd consider this phone. The problem is, if you were also expecting a solid selfie camera, yeah, that's a totally different story, which I'll talk about later. The Axon 30 has a single bottom firing speaker tuned by DTS that sounds fine. It'll get the job done, but stereo speakers would appear so nice with this display and elevated the whole experience. You'll also find an optical fingerprint scanner under the display. Maybe placed a little low, but works really, really well. I say it works 99% of the time. Definitely one of the better in-display scanners I've used. The entire back and frame are plastic, which is probably how they managed to make this phone so light, even though it's a pretty big device. I could have definitely lived without all this extra branding on the back. You've got the ZTE logo here, the words Axon running along here, and even the camera bump is stamped in 2 different spots. It just feels a little overdone to me. Oh, other things to note regarding build. The vibration motor is a little mushy. There's no water resistance rating, no wireless charging, but this does, however, have expandable storage and dual SIM support. You actually get quite a few goodies in the box too, including a 65-watt charging brick, a USB-C cable, a headphone dongle, and even a clear phone case. 65 watts is the fastest charging I've ever used. You can go from 0 to 100 in like just around 40 minutes. I was a little nervous about the battery life when I saw that it only had a 4200 milliamp hour battery, but for the most part, it managed to get me through a full day. Unless you're using it a lot, you should be okay. The phone runs Android 11 with ZTE's MyOS 11 skin on top. I appreciate that ZTE doesn't try to jam the phone with a bunch of their own apps. They stick with Google for the basics, like phone, messages, photos, and Gmail. Those all come pre-installed as the default apps. It's actually a pretty clean experience that doesn't get in your way. If you dive into the settings, ZTE did add some cool software features. I won't go through all of them, but these are the ones that I thought were helpful. You can add a step counter to your lock screen. When you get a call, putting the phone to your ear will automatically answer it. Similar to that, if you're talking on speakerphone, putting the phone to your ear will turn off speakerphone. From the lock screen, you can shake the phone twice to turn the flashlight on, shake it twice again to turn it off. I have absolutely no complaints about the performance. It handles everything I've thrown at it, including the occasional gaming session. The one thing that bugs me about the UI though, is that the title and artist info gets cut off in the media player notification. It's not that big of a deal at the end of the day, but it does feel a little unpolished. Alright, let's talk about the cameras. I was actually really curious to see what kind of quality this 16 megapixel under display camera could produce. I didn't expect it to be amazing, but the quality is definitely not up to par. There's a ton of post-processing to make it somewhat respectable. If you're someone who takes a lot of selfies or plans on doing a lot of vlogs, this might not cut it. Everything just has a haze over it. But hey, that's the trade-off for the technology right now. You're sacrificing the camera quality for the uninterrupted display. On the back, there's a total of 4 cameras, including a 64 megapixel main lens. This is more than good enough for someone who just needs a functional camera. It's a little inconsistent when it comes to color temperature, and HDR is a little underwhelming. But those are only things someone who's really into photography would even notice. My parents, for example, would look at the photos from this phone and be more than thrilled with it. An ultra wide lens is probably my second most used lens on any smartphone, so glad to have it here. I almost never use a macro lens, but it lets you get nice and close with your photos. Personally, I would have been 100% okay with them scrapping the macro lens and throwing in stereo speakers instead.
The video using the back cameras are much better. While you check out some footage I shot, I gotta give a huge shout out to today's video sponsor, Surfshark, for making reviews like this possible. So what Surfshark does is that it encrypts all your data before it goes over the internet. So people you don't want having access to your personal information won't have access to it, especially relevant on sketchy public Wi-Fi. Being Canadian, one of my favorite uses for Surfshark is to access content from other countries. With one click, I can discover content from anywhere, including the US, UK, even Japan. What's great is that there's no limit to the number of devices you can connect at a time. So that means your mom, brother, sister, everyone in the family is secured. If that all sounds good, check out Surfshark now by clicking the link below and using my promo code Thao. You'll get 83% off and 3 months completely free.
So priced at $500, there's definitely some trade-offs, but this phone has a lot going for it. The problem is, there's a lot of tough competition coming in at cheaper price points. You've got the iPhone SE, the Pixel 5a, or even the Galaxy A lineup. Those are all devices from some big, well-known companies. Software updates is something to consider as well, as I just can't see ZTE being able to match what Samsung, Google, or Apple are offering. With that being said, competition is good, and if you've always wanted a phone without anything cutting into the display, well, this might be exactly what you're looking for, because this is a really nice screen to look at. As usual, thank you so much for watching. Until the next one, I'm out of here.